In my opening remarks, I talked about Sudan's community-led emergency response rooms, or ERRs, and how they've been essential to the survival of the Sudanese people, providing basic meals for civilians throughout the country through community-run kitchens that were previously supported in part by USAID funding. The Trump administration's aid cuts forced nearly 80% of ERR activities to stop and affected the operations of over 1,460 community kitchens. Now, the United States no longer provides any direct funding to the ERRs. Ms. Widdersheim, can you explain to the committees why the ERRs are so critical to providing life-saving aid to the Sudanese communities and why they are more efficient and effective at delivering aid?
Thanks. Thank you for the question. And I would note that we have some members of the ERRs and their representatives here to hear this hearing today. And
thank you all for everything that you do.
And some of them also have lost relatives in this recent round of fighting in El Fasher. The ERRs, well, let me just start a little bit in putting my former USAID hat on. When I worked in Sudan and other places with USAID, it was always clear, and I think that USAID tried over the years to do this, is to really focus resources towards localization. And the ERRs represented the epitome and almost a perfect example of that type of localization, where if you got them not a ton of money, they were so much more efficient, and they lived there. They lived in these villages, and they served these emergency response rooms and soup kitchens right there in the community that they were from. And they knew the people, and they knew how to cross lines. They were actually peacemakers in trying to get their humanitarian assistance and keep their kitchens serving people right there among the belligerents and the parties to this conflict. And so it was a cheaper way to get food in. It was a way to access places where international and UN entities could not get to or had fled from. And it was truly keeping people alive. So, you know, the fact that that has gone away, particularly from the US government, is just really crushing and heartbreaking. Because as USAID was folded and dissolved, one of the things that I heard over and over again was that it wasn't efficient, or it was too expensive. And yet we have this mechanism that already was homegrown and would be there after, hopefully after, it was there before, during the democratic revolution on the streets of Khartoum. That's where it was founded from. And it has continued to operate, and it's already there and established. And we need to get some more resources than currently are going now back to them. The other thing that they do is that even if they're getting a trickle of food aid from the United States or from the World Food Program, they're also doing so much more than just food aid. And when you have a crisis of this magnitude, people have lost everything. They've lost their farming tools. Women don't have access to hygiene products, to basic neonatal care, all of these things that an emergency brings in addition to food and famine. So I would just highly recommend that this body, Congress and writ large, that has the power of the purse in our government, really try to work to get funding reestablished to the emergency response rooms.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. Mr. Isaacs, a question for you. Prior to Samaritan's Purse, you worked at USAID, where you were in charge of the Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance. You recently published a book titled Running to the Fire, Helping in Jesus' Name, that details all of your humanitarian work in disaster contexts. In Sudan, the United States has been the top donor for years, but the foreign aid cuts by this administration have left many Sudanese communities abandoned. For example, Hanan, an internally displaced person, now no longer can afford her medication or food. She tried to compensate for lost food by relying on meals from a nearby community kitchen, but then the U.S. funding cuts forced that kitchen to close. And as of this month, Sudan's 2025 humanitarian appeal of $4.16 billion is only 35% funded. What impacts have you seen on the U.S. foreign aid cuts and USAID's dismantlement, and have you seen it get easier or harder to deliver as much food and other assistance in Sudan as before?
Well, since you mentioned my book, if you wanted to go to Amazon and do a review, it'd be greatly appreciated. Tell me your question again. I want to hear it one more time.
Sure. What impacts have you seen from the U.S. foreign aid cuts and USAID's dismantlement? And have you seen it get easier or harder to deliver as much food and other assistance into Sudan as before?
I don't think that the restriction of the money has improved nor hardened the access issues. The access issues are stimulated from political and military problems. But there's no, I mean, if you've got less money, you can do less things. That's, you know, pretty straightforward mathematics. But I will say this, on the, and it's been an encouraging sign for us, on the Nuba Mountains, the State Department is continuing to engage with us in the cross-border feeding operation, and we're very encouraged by that. There is some reorganization going on and what all the new shops are going to be set up and how that structure is going to work. And I think there's also a growing awareness that the things that existed for a reason, and then many of them need to be brought back. So we're talking about the ERR rooms, and we have an operation in Port Sudan. We're active in Khartoum, or what's left of Khartoum, and we coordinate very closely. Samaritan's Purse is doing that, and we're coordinating very closely with those community organizations, and they do prove to be effective. Other than that, I can't speak to all of the issues, and besides the fact that if you have money, you can buy more resources. But I do, Congresswoman, just want to emphasize how important I believe it is to recognize that you can't solve a political problem with a humanitarian response.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And I just want to emphasize, I think we need to be funding the ERRs and the humanitarian response much more. I also think we need a real diplomatic approach that holds the regional actors accountable for their role in perpetuating this conflict. In the meantime, we need to do everything we can to relieve the suffering. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will yield back.